Okay, good morning, everyone. It just got quiet, so I'll take that as a cue to get started outside of the time. Um, Good morning. I would like to welcome you all to the MTS Public Security Committee meeting. It is now 10:33 a.m. and I will call this meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Members, please make your selections on the tablets. Chair, we have a quorum with 5 members present and 2 members absent.
Okay, thank you very much. So the first item on our agenda is non-agenda public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda today. Do we have any members of the public that wish to do so today?
We do not.
Okay, all right. Next is approval of the minutes from our March 7th, 2025 Public Security Committee meeting. We are now being asked to approve these minutes. Any comments from the public on this?
We do not.
Okay, and if there are none, would need a motion. I'll entertain a motion at this time to approve the minutes.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by committee member Dillard. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second by committee member Fernandez. If there's no other discussion, let's vote.
Members, please make your selections on the tablets. Motion passes with 5 members voting yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We will move right along to item number 4. This is the Fair Enforcement Diversion Program update. Samantha Leslie will be presenting to us on this item. Please proceed whenever you are ready. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Samantha Leslie, and I'll be providing the presentation on the Fair Enforcement Diversion Program update. So as background, valid fare is required when using our services. That would include validating your fare upon a trolley station on a validator for entering a trolley, when you enter into a bus, or upon request from security. And in the event you do not have a fare, you may be cited for fare evasion. And since September 1st of 2020, we have had a diversion program, which is a way to resolve your citation outside of the court administratively. Recently, we have made some revisions, which I'll be talking about further today, to the diversion and monitoring the success and impacts of the updated diversion program. But in summary, effective February 1st, the current diversion program is, if you are receipt of a fare evasion citation, you can, in multiple different ways, resolve it internally with MTS before it is submitted to court. So we will hold the citation for 120 days, and you may, one of the ways you can complete diversion is request a one-time waiver of your citation. If it is your first citation issued since February 1st, you may pay a reduced fine of $25 to MTS in multiple different ways. You may complete 3 hours of community service, or you may appeal to MTS if you have proof you had valid fare at the time of citation, or that a ticket vending machine was not working. So if you complete any of those options within 120 days, we'll resolve it internally, void it out. It'll never be sent to court. If you do not complete diversion with 120 days, it will then be sent to court and adjudicated at court accordingly. So there has been recently changes to the diversion program. In October of 2024, the board made a change to the on the fare spot option. So since September 1st, 2020, there was an option where if you were found without a valid fare, you had the opportunity before being cited to buy your fare on the spot, whether that be buying a $250 fare or tapping stored value. And due to data and monitoring of this over the 4 years, there were some concerns regarding fare evasion, risking it, fare evasion. And so they removed that option to purchase a one-way fare on the spot effective February 1st, 2025. In addition, the board also increased the different methods of paying a $25 fine, which includes paying it online and on the phone. And they also added a option of a one-time waiver request. No reason necessary about why you're requesting the waiver, but as long as it's your first citation since February 1st, you'll be granted a one-time waiver. And then lastly, revising the diversion program from being a pilot to a permanent program. And the goals of the diversion program have been to just incentivize people to have a fare. We want people to have a fare every time they ride. And we don't want people to risk it and wait to be caught to have a fare. So that has always been one of the goals of the diversion program. But most importantly, it's been to offer a non-criminal path to resolve your citation. Going to court, it can be very expensive, intimidating, a lot to try to understand. And so we wanted to make it a very user-friendly, easy way to work internally with MTS to resolve a citation before it gets forwarded to court. And we believe the diversion program does meet those goals. We allow 120 days or 4 months to complete diversion internally before it goes to the court. We offer a quite reduced fine if you work through the diversion program, $25 instead of $200 or more if it went directly to court. We offer community service to any individual who wants it. You can use it as many times as you want. We don't require even proof that you have an inability to pay. It's available for anyone. We offer a very informal and quick appeal. If you have proof of valid fare, we'll double check your pronto fare, see that you had valid fare, and get that process, usually within a week or two. And in the individuals that come to us that might have a lot of fare evasion sites in the past or recently, and they don't know how to handle resolving so many sites, we'll work with them. We'll forward them along to the homeless court program, because you can work through a social service provider and get these older citations waived. We'll also come up with plans where instead of having to complete 10 hours community service for multiple sites, maybe we can work out a deal where it's a little bit less. And so we will work individually with each person about how we can help them with these fare evasion sites. So removing the elimination of the buy on the spot fare, this was something passengers were used to over the last 4 years. And so we did do a big rollout, education, marketing, and effort to show and explain that is no longer an option with the diversion effective February 1st, and that we have all these different ways to now complete diversion. We're hoping to get the word out better about that. So we did a big campaign effort between November to present on educating that a valid fare is required. And if you're not with a valid fare, you may be cited, but we have all these different ways through the diversion program where you can resolve it. And so we did newsletters and pop-ups and updates to our websites. When you call customer service, there would be a whole message about the program. Ads, panels, banners. In the field, when security was contacting during fare enforcement contacts, they would explain, hey, in February 1st, this is what's going to happen. They would provide info cards. We put wraps, A-frames, screensavers. We really tried to get the word out so everyone was aware of how the new diversion program was going to look like effective February 1st. And it was a multi-department effort for the last several months to make sure this was implemented. We also did some administrative pieces to implement the revised diversion program. When you're cited for fare evasion, we have this envelope that kind of holds the citation and explains the diversion program. So we redesigned that, ordered new ones, and now it's being deployed to explain how the diversion program currently works. We developed an online website submission to submit one-time waiver requests of your citation. We developed an online Square portal to pay the $25 reduced fine, worked with our Pronto support team on ways to call in to pay a $25 fine. And so through all these methods and efforts, we have successfully implemented the program effective February 1st. So how it's going, again, it started February 1st, and you have 120 days to complete diversion. So this is still an ongoing effort to monitor, but so far we have seen a 6% decrease in fare evasion rates when looking at Pronto fare collection data. And then 2, we've seen increase in fare revenue. So of the fare enforcement efforts and outreach related to diversion, we are seeing specifically a $450,000 per month increase in fare revenue for the last 2 months that we don't believe specifically ties to just a ridership increase. So that's very promising as well. For diversion, prior to February 1st, we did see a very low participation in diversion. Usually about 2% of those cited participated with a diversion each month, mostly paying the reduced fine of $25. Now with diversion, since February 1st, we're seeing a really promising increase. People are definitely using the one-time waiver. That is the way most people are resolving these citations. Next is paying a reduced fine of $25. And then lastly, using the appeal. And this is still an ongoing data review because even for February 1st sites, they still actually have a couple more days of 120 days to complete diversion. So we're still monitoring it. But just looking at the data yesterday, 30 sites had completed diversion of those that were issued on February 1st. So it's close to 25% participation in diversion. So very promising compared to 2% just about 5 months ago. And so we're hopeful to continue to see that to grow as people learn about the diversion program and hear about and understand all the ways that you can use it. Feedback generally has been positive. We always are tracking if there was any confusing things about our program or issues, and we're seeing general positive feedback. I did want to share this great email I received that is showing that this program is making positive benefits to people's day-to-day, and it makes a difference. This was an individual who did the one-time waiver, and not only are they saying in this email that they're going to change their behavior and figure out ways to pay and have a valid fare moving forward, but that this one-time waiver was a huge benefit because he didn't have the ability to pay the 25 reduced fine. So it really shows that both of our goals are being met with an example like this one. So next steps, we're going to continue to monitor. Again, we still haven't had even 120 days pass of February 1st site. So we still want to keep tracking how those move forward. So keep monitoring our fare inspection contacts out in the field, monitor the data from our Pronto fare collection system, monitor special enforcement details. That's another way we can look at fare evasion, and generally just participation in the diversion program. And then lastly, another next step for us here, we did notice that some of the citations issued, if you looked at the individual address of the person, they were putting addresses that relate to a social service agency. So it may show that they're experiencing homelessness at that time. And so we were thinking about maybe there could be partnerships with these social service organizations, such as the Neil Good Day Center. Could we increase outreach there at the center? Could they help us get the word out? Could we have a more direct line with these centers on participating in diversion? Could they complete the community service right then and there when they're at these centers? So we're open to any ideas that we kind of talk out. We're already in contact and setting up meetings with them. So we hope this kind of partnership could also be another way to increase diversion participation even more than it's currently at. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on the program.
Samantha, thank you so much for the presentation. Just want to check and see if there's any public comment before we go to committee members.
We do.
Okay.
Park Troutman, can you please move your way up to the podium?
Good morning.
My name is Park Troutman. I am with Mid-City CAN in City Heights, primarily a youth advocacy organization. My question for today is, where does Youth Opportunity Pass fit into fare enforcement, fare evasion efforts? The reason asking about this is we have gotten reports from youth after the March 31st requirement for that Youth Opportunity Passes be verified, that youth were forced to pay or were not allowed on the bus. And we were told by MTS staff that there would be a 1 month inform not enforced period. And we're just trying to figure out like where this fits in and what's actually happening. Like we hear the complaints, but like the dog doesn't bark, people didn't have problems, we wouldn't hear that. So we just like get a sense of like where, what has happened, what are future plans, because the regional fare ordinance says that a youth can be required to provide a school or government ID upon entering a transit vehicle if requested. So it seems like that's the way that could be handled if there's a problem with their Pronto card. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
That concludes public comment, Chair.
Okay. Any committee members want to start? Committee member Gobel.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Always good to have data to know exactly what the situation, the truth of the matter is. My question is, how do you know when someone has already used the one-time waiver? The code inspector at the spot won't know that. I suppose he or she will issue the citation, and then in the back end somewhere, you will know that person has already had a waiver?
Right. So the way it works is everyone is getting issued a citation, and on the back end, if you request, I'd like the waiver, on the back end, we'll review all citations issued to that individual, double check maybe the date of birth if there's multiple individuals with the same name, and confirm this, yes, this citation is the first one issued to that person, and if so, we will grant the waiver and send an email or a letter confirming it's been voided and resolved and not being sent to court.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. We'll start with just slide 13. I'll try to be quick. Are we engaging yet with Nil Day Goods Center, or are you kind of looking for direction, like maybe a list of agencies?
We would be very interested hearing feedback on other agencies. We just noticed Neil Good Day Center was the top address we saw. So we thought we'd focus on that. I did get a contact name.
Okay.
I think his individual's name is Raymond, that we're trying to set up a time. He's going to set me up with someone at this center to maybe have a meeting. Also got a voicemail just yesterday from, I think, a woman named Catherine who does the volunteer organization there. So right now I'm in this process of trying to set up meetings with the center, but open definitely to others.
Okay, that would be great. I'm also thinking about the mobile unit that the county has that where people can apply for different resources, services, food stamps, and all of those. And we have no idea what the future of all those programs are, but we do have the mobile unit that there's a possibility that we can connect you all and to see if this can be a part of that type of engagement. We have that mobile unit out at our homeless resource fairs, of which MTS has also been a part. So it may be a good addition to that mobile unit. Want to go to the youth opportunity, pass the question around there. And I think on slide 10, it mentioned something about the youth opportunity. Yes, the asterisk, the additional information. First, what does that mean in context of how we've been looking at the numbers? Does that change? Are we comparing apples and oranges just based on the fact that it sounds like there's a piece of information that has been left out of this new data point? Or are we, how does that change how we've been looking at this?
And I can jump in because
Okay.
I primarily, worked with the data. When we had done the statistics in the past, the stored value category that came through our Pronto data was just called stored value. And so we knew if stored value was okay or not. They have since on the back end further refined that. And what was included in the old bucket of stored value was both what truly is stored value, the one-way passes, but also youth fare or youth-free passes. And so now that we can separate them out, we went back and reran all of the prior data to give us the statistics. And really what it showed is that about 7% of the fares that were in the old stored value category were actually youth-free. So we pulled them out. So the only changes that in a prior presentation, if you looked at it, we had a 33% rate, and now really it's a 26% fare evasion rate because we've pulled youth out of that data. That didn't affect anything going on in the field, So, and then as it relates to the youth enforcement, Tim might have more information, but we're not like a youth. If you have a youth-free pass, so you have the approved Pronto product, then it's the same thing. Like sometimes it might show up, yes, like okay, meaning you've tapped, or it would show like no ticket, but then when they look on the back end, it's a pass. And so you don't get a citation for that. So if you have it, I think that the issue in the field is more in order to take advantage of Youth Opportunity Pass, you actually have to then apply for and get that pass product. You know, if you can't ride with nothing. And so in order to get the free one, you have to have the pass. And so while we were reminding people out in the field that you need to have a pass, it was, if you don't have a pass, then you might get a ticket because you're technically riding without a fare.
Yeah, but we're not currently citing youth for, so they're not really engaged on the issue of the diversion program. So what we are doing is we are educating youth and telling them you're supposed to have a Pronto card in order to ride for free. And we have actually had a very, very good uptake on the youth, getting the youth pass on Pronto. So that's been really helpful for us. I think we're at 89% of anybody who's tapped in the last 2 months or something like that. But anyway, and then it's a lot of education. But a bus driver, for instance, will say, hey, you're supposed to pay because you don't have the Pronto card. But they're not going to strand them at the bus stop in that regard.
Okay. Do we have anything to add?
No, I haven't. We, like Ms. Cooney said, we're not citing the minors, the juveniles for a lack of a YOP pass. We educate, and we're not leaving anybody stranded. We're not removing them from any trains or any buses. So make sure to get to their destination safe.
Okay, we'll just circle back with Mid-City Canada so that we can just get clarity on everything that was just
Yeah,
said.
and we've looked at a lot of the instances that they've brought to our attention. Sometimes the story isn't always the same story once you look at what happened. So anyway, we're trying to resolve anytime we get a complaint like that. We want to deep dive into it to make sure that we're being consistent.
Okay, we'll follow up. I have a few members of the team here, so we'll be sure to follow up. Just back to stored value real quick. I brought that up because I remember having a very deep conversation about how we were looking at stored value and how we were using stored value as a data point to say for our fare evasion rate, right? And so I'm glad to see that we're kind of going back and cleaning it up a bit because, you know, those numbers seem to be a little bit inflated to me. And also the way we were using stored value in our evaluation. So any other committee members? Committee member Dillard?
Yeah, I just had a quick question on the verification of a student. How does the bus driver or the patrol know that it's a student? Are they asking for a student ID or are they just looking at them and thinking they look young enough? How's that verified?
No, so under the process that we put in place, the youth have to get a youth Pronto card. And in order to get that, they go into our portal or they come down here to the transit store. And what they can do is they can upload a form of identification, whether it's a passport, a student school ID, or some other picture ID that can be verified. And then they take a picture of themselves and then that gets processed. And then their Pronto card or their phone, if they're using that as their Pronto card, becomes a youth Pronto card.
Right.
And so what the bus driver would see is just that it's been processed. When they tap on the reader, it will show that they have a youth card and there's no questions asked because the picture is showing that that's the person.
Yeah, I get that part, but my question actually is before that. So if someone gets on the bus, for instance, and they don't have anything and they're just saying they're a student, if the bus driver warns them that they have to have the pass, how is it verified that they're even a student, or are they just letting them go in hopes that they will get the pass?
Yeah, they ask them to pay the adult fare.
Oh, okay.
And then if they don't, they're not enforcing because they're not enforcers, they're drivers. And so if the student refuses or the individual refuses to get off the bus, they will then, I believe, send radio in to let them know that they didn't comply.
Okay, I was
With
just
the
wondering
and mark
if
it
there was
free.
a filtering process for anyone who just says, well, I'm a student. So that's all I was asking is, Are we verifying that they are in fact a student and then advising them? Or are we just letting them go through because they said they were a student and you don't even know if they're really a student? That's all I'm saying, because
Right.
you could be 18 and still be a student, or you could be, 21 and look like a student. I don't know.
I think it's different on bus and trolley, just like, so with our officers, Tim, trolley, like the fare evasion rate on bus is actually very low. It's 3%, which is why then the 26% on trolley, is concerning. But if you don't have a pronto pass and you appear, and so some of it is kind of subjective to be a youth, then I think officers will just counsel and warn. If it looks like there's a potential that this person does not appear to be a youth and they don't have any ID, that they may be issued a ticket, but then that would be part of the appeal process. So if that person was in fact a youth, they could submit, through the diversion process kind of proof, and then that citation would end up being waived.
Okay, thank you. That was all I had, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we, Committee Member Goebel?
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a difference between those who ride for work to get to and from work and those who are riding for non-work purposes. Sometimes I see people on the trolley or at a bus stop in a work uniform. And if they are cited, it would be interesting to see somehow if we could get a hold of the employer to say, would you consider buying a monthly pass for this employee? Because it's in your best interest as an employer to have this person show up without violating privacy about, their situation. I just wish there was a way that we could separate those traveling for work who are cited, that there may be an effort to have the employer pay the monthly pass even, instead of this person potentially getting cited repeatedly. That would kind of break that cycle of non-fares. I think that would be something to at least think about. It may not go anywhere, but if you had a little piece of paper to hand to the person and say, you appear to be traveling for work, you're in uniform, maybe you can give this to your employer and they'll consider buying a monthly pass for you. That would certainly seem to be in everybody's best interest. Food for thought.
Just thank you again, and thank you for showing the quote, because I think from the very beginning, that's what this program was supposed to be all about. Like we were seeing, well, first of all, it was 2020. We all know what was going on then, right? And we were responding to a very, very high number of citations that were being issued, and trying to make sure that we were doing enforcement, but also not making people's lives much, much harder, especially if they were on a certain track. So I appreciate you sharing the quote and also the numbers, the increase. There's probably a lot of reasons why that happened at that time, but at least we have the program and now that it's permanent. So thank you very much. If there are no other comments, questions, let's go on to item number 5. And I think that Karen Landers is presenting this for us. So you can begin whenever you are ready.
All right. Let's see if I know actually how to. Okay. Good morning. I'm just going to pick up somewhat where Samantha left off, because this item is on our fare enforcement models. And, as Samantha described, what we have is called a hybrid model, which means it's both administrative, like the diversion program that we have is an administrative program. And if you don't participate in the diversion program, then it gets sent to court and kind of goes into the criminal category. Then there are programs that are purely criminal where they don't have a diversion program. So you get the citation, goes straight to court. And then there's other programs where under the Public Utility Code, they've set up a way that you could do a fully administrative program. And so right now, LA Metro and San Francisco Muni both have fully administrative programs. And one thing that had come up was, skipping ahead to, but this committee at prior meetings had asked us to consider and look into and bring to the committee reports on what it would look like if MTS switched from our current program to an administrative program. So that's kind of the point of this presentation today. And so as we talked about, MTS has that current hybrid model. And then there's a diversion program that Samantha just went through. So I won't belabor too much about what that program is, but that's our administrative portion of our program. In that, if we wanted to switch over to an administrative fair model, that would mean replacing our current model. So we would replace the diversion program and the criminal citation process with a fully administrative model under this section 99580. When we talked about this last was at the September 2024 meeting, and there had been issues raised by local law enforcement that if we switched to an administrative program that could impact some of our other enforcement activities and might infect our own officers' ability to stop and detain people or to partner with local law enforcement during our fair enforcement activities. And so at that time, we needed to clear up that issue before we dived any deeper. We went out and hired a outside counsel to give us an opinion under kind of criminal procedure rules. And they confirmed that there is not a concern that changing to administrative model would not alter, these other enforcement practices wouldn't make anything that we do. So we wouldn't have to change that. Since that issue has been resolved, we don't have to worry about factoring that into your consideration on fair enforcement models. So because changing to an administrative model would mean stopping our current program and going to a next one, I thought the easiest way to display this to the board was to just kind of do a side-by-side comparison about what our program currently has and then what the 99580 model does. So right now under our model, the first steps of ours is administrative, and we have a significantly lower fine than the fine amount of the 99580 programs. So ours is $25. The San Francisco, Muni and LA Metro and the statute set it at $75. It's the max with a max of $125. For MTS, if you don't resolve that at the diversion program stage and it gets sent to court, then the statutory fine amount is $75 plus court fees, which normally is a little bit over $200. And that applies at MTS if after 120 days, you take no action. For under administrative model, if you took no action, then the first deadline in most cases is a $100 fine, and the second missed deadline is $125. But under that statute for first and second violations, the max amount that it could get to is $125. For third and subsequent violations, the 99580 allows you to increase that fine to $200. And whereas at MTS, we don't differentiate between how many times you've been cited. So every time you get cited, the diversion program fine amount is $25. And so that doesn't change. Under MTS's program, we offer 3 hours of community service in lieu of paying that fine. There is not a statutory minimum or maximum under the 99580 model, but the other two programs do 5 hours. One of the other things is pretty much similar, I think, in both of these models. MTS, our diversion program, we give people 15 days to appeal the citation if they really think it should not have been issued. And normally that's because they had a fair product, it just couldn't read it or something like that. Or maybe they tried to purchase a fare at a ticket vending machine and it wasn't working. Those are things where our staff will investigate. They'll look at the Pronto data. They might pull video to see, did the person go up and try to buy something at the ticket vending machine? We'll check with maintenance to find out if the ticket vending machine was actually working or not. And if so, then we'll cancel that citation. And that's kind of back end. They submit their information and we go and investigate it. Under the 99580 model, you've got 21 days to request an initial review, and it sounds like it's a pretty similar process that they would, if they would cancel it if the review shows the violation did not occur or the interest of justice merit cancellation. If you want to appeal, like formally appeal the fine, so you maybe the initial review or our appeal was not satisfactory, but you still think you shouldn't have gotten it. Under our program, that basically means you're declining to participate in diversion. And so then the site would be sent to court and the person could plead not guilty with the court in person. And at that point, then MTS isn't really leading that adjudication process and it's handled by the court. Under the 99580 model, if the citation is not canceled after that initial review appeal, then they can request an administrative hearing. The one distinction between our program and the administrative is that it requires a deposit of the fine amount. So if the fine amount is $75, in order to request that administrative hearing, you have to first deposit that $75 to get your hearing. Whereas with court, you don't have to deposit your fine until a judge adjudicates, your case. So for penalty for non-payment under our program, if you fail to participate in diversion, then again, we send it to court and then the court process would set up. If you don't pay it at the court stage, then the court generally sends unpaid fines to collections. Under the 99580 models, they also send unpaid fines to collections. So if you don't pay your fine after your citation, if you then miss some of the late notices, and if you would have paid your fine if you had an administrative hearing since you have to deposit it. But if you don't pay those, then those programs have a collections vendor that then sends that unpaid fine to the collections process. And then MTS does work on various post-conviction relief programs. So we have worked with the public defender's office that runs the San Diego Homeless Court Program. And so, we participate in that to the extent that if after conviction, somebody goes through the homeless court program process, works with social services, it's really intended to, they may not be ready to resolve whatever else is going on in their life at the time they got the citations. And so they let them pile up and often other things. If they go successfully through those programs, then the court will pull back and dismiss those citations, and they'll actually pull back those fines from collection vendors and other things. And so MTS participates in that process, agrees to have anything related to MTS waived and pulled back. And then if something is not currently gone all the way through the court process, if we have somebody coming in late wanting to participate in diversion, if the court hasn't adjudicated it yet, then we will also submit motions to dismiss to court for certain citations for late participation. So if we're able to do that, our goal is really just to convince people to start working with our FAIR program and buying fares. And so we will then try to pull them back from court if we're able to, if it's not far enough along in that process. But it's unclear from our research that we've done so far of the programs that do the 99580 model, if there is even post-conviction relief. I mean, that there's not necessarily a conviction, but how would you be able to pull the collections side of it back, from that? I think that then we would maybe have to set up and identify, are you even able to at that point when you have a collections vendor to pull back those cases? Potentially, maybe there would be costs to the agency to do that. But that's something that's a little unclear under the administrative model. So right now, for our citation hardware, our officers are still using physical citation booklets, and then we manually data entry the citations into our system. The administrative models, especially ones that have different offenses for first, second, third violations, we would need to have electronic citation devices and printing devices to be able to print them. And cloud data storage. That's what the other programs that do that. And so that would be a change in process and a cost that we would have to do for that at that point. Program management, right now, we're able to operate our diversion program with current staff. We're certainly monitoring it as the program has changed since February 1st, but for this administrative program, it seems clear that we would need a third-party program management vendor that would manage the citations, sending out the notices, overseeing the hearing process, scheduling the appeal hearings, and those sorts of things. That both of the other programs that we've looked at have a vendor that does that. Hearing officers is another thing right now on our informal appeal process that's handled by internal staff. And so we don't have specific hearing officers. The Superior Court would handle any formal court process. That's if after the 120 days it goes there. Under the administrative program, we would need to have hearing officers. It's a little unclear what the volume would be. The BART pays a bench of hearing officers per hearing fee. So we were trying to estimate what the cost of that would be if there were maybe 30 appeals a month, but that is a little bit uncertain. But we would have to set up a contract for there to be independent hearing officers to handle those administrative hearings. And then our current model, it's already in place. So we've got additional staff. We'll see if as the volume of diversion participation goes up, if we do need additional staff. And then again, you would need staff on the administrative model, but it's unclear. It might be about the same. You know, LA Metro has 3 dedicated staff, but other agencies combine it with other duties. And so that would be a little bit unclear. But even if we hired a third-party vendor, we'd need at least 1 or 2 staff to oversee them and, you know, give them direction on various, you know, policy matters. So in that, and looking at what would it cost to change the administrative model based on the cost of the biggest cost is that citation hardware, you know, and software system, and then just a program management vendor and to handle the citations, the hearing process, and also mail out various required notices that are required under the statute. There would need to be a collections vendor. That sounds like that would probably be part of the overall program management vendor, that normally they're combined. We would need hearing officers, office space. We might be able to handle that with existing. It depends on like how often. Like, do you need a everyday dedicated hearing room, or is it something that a couple of days a month you could have a hearing in the boardroom? You know, that would just depend on what the volume is. And then there would be some unknown, you know, startup costs. But so what we're looking for direction today is just to have the committee provide us with feedback. Do you want us to prepare a transition plan to change from our current model to the fully administrative model? Ultimately, that would have to go to the board for approval, but you know, the process normally has been that we would bring that back to you all, and then you would make a recommendation to send it to the board. And if we did a transition plan, you know, kind of what would those steps be? We would really need to probably do some site visits to some of the administrative hearing agencies to understand really day-to-day how they operate. They have offered to do that because right now we've really just done phone interviews to try to understand how their programs work. And then we would have to identify the scopes of work for these various contracts and come up with independent cost estimates.
So just to follow on what the possible action is, from my perspective, the diversion program is new. We want to see where that goes. We only have a few months of data. It is a very liberal approach to allowing people to resolve their evasion citations before it gets into the court system. And I think that from my perspective, and I think from staff's perspective, we would recommend that we can stay the course for now, come back to the committee again in September when we meet, or I guess we meet in August, I think, and bring you more data and then go from there. But certainly want to hear what the committee has to say.
Thank you both. Just want to turn to see if there's any public comment.
We do not.
Okay. Committee Member Dillard.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. At the end of the day, I don't think that, I'll just say this first, that we should spend any money right now, especially given what Sharon just shared, because I was thinking the same thing. Like, the program that we have right now is brand new. And I'm also reminded, Chair, of when I first came on into this committee, there was a big concern about the spiraling effect of people being fined and then, somehow not able to get out of it. It ends up reflecting on their credit, and then, their life just goes further down in trying to recover or, make any sense out of even trying to correct their situation if they get into a fine situation with the courts, and it just gets worse for them and they're never able to recover. And we don't even know how many people that is at this point, but that's a concern of mine, that if we go too far with this administrative model, that could be where we're back into the same boat that we were when I first started hearing about this. And that's concerning to me. But what I was going to ask you, Karen, is do we know any other transit organization that has this model? Do we know of anybody? And have we made any comparisons as to their success or major issues that have come up?
So, LA Metro and Muni in San Francisco use this model. And we've had several talks back and forth with them. It depends on who you talk to, the level of success. It's their fare evasion rate hasn't necessarily changed, though I also acknowledge that it's hard to tell how each agency calculates their fare evasion rate. So I'm not sure how great of a comparison that is. But Samantha has had, more of the conversations. That's why if we really wanted to do it, we'd want to do some site visits and really talk with the people in the field and how they are. The number of hearings that they do is a little unclear, and the amount of revenue they collect and how much is in collections is also a little bit unclear. It's hard to get that data. But LA has 3 dedicated staff, and they have 2 hearing office locations. And then Muni or like BART has a similar program, but they're a little bit, we call them hybrid because they do have a point where they send them to court as well. But they're the ones that have, virtual hearing officers that will charge per one. But it's interesting just because you have to deposit the fine before you can have the hearing. So it's unclear how many hearings they actually have in that situation, especially when there's that initial review process that their program has and our program has of, if you really think there's a factual defense to your fare evasion site, that should be handled at that step. And so one thing that's a little unclear to me of these agencies that have that program of what is actually getting argued at those hearings. Like we haven't sat in on any of the hearings that they have. That would be, I think, something we'd want to do if the committee wanted us to look at it is, is it just somebody challenging it for the sake of challenging it? Or is there some type of defense that's not captured by that initial review?
Not to mention if we're clogging up the courts and it's not factoring out cost-wise that we're actually, gaining anything from it at the end of the day. The other question I had is if you could go to page 6. If we were going to make any adjustments, I still am with the idea that we would take more time to have more data and see how our program is going on before we just start making changes. But if we did make changes and we didn't want to go with the administrative model, I could see where we could make some changes down the line if we saw that it was fit to make changes like what is on page 6, having 15 days, if that's not really, turning out to be quite enough days to give someone to pay the citation or address the citation. then maybe we could change it to a 21 day. I'm not really sure what the decision was on the 21 days, but
And this is for that initial review. So to pay the diversion program, you have 120 days.
Right.
If you're like, I should not have gotten this citation, this is not fair, we want you to bring that to us within 15 days. We're not super strict with that deadline,
Yeah.
but the reason we chose that is because some of the cameras on our system only have about 14 days of memory. So if somebody's defense is, I tried to buy the ticket at the fare machine or something like that, where we actually go out and say like, well, what was the date and time? And we'll go pull that video. And so that really assists us in doing that investigation. So having somebody come to us as soon as possible with those objections actually allows us to much more thoroughly investigate and adjudicate that one, where we may only have their word against like no other evidence to compare it to, which would make it hard for us to grant that appeal. So that was why that 15 days was chosen.
okay, well, that makes total sense. And I agree, if you can address it sooner rather than later, it's up at the top of their minds. On page 8, I just wanted to know, at what point is someone's credit is their credit affected along the way? I realize that there's the 120 days, but then after that, if they're not able to get it together.
So once a fine, and I am not an expert in credit, but for MTS, when the first 120 days, when it's here and you've got that $25, it's all internal. There's no citation sent to court at that point. It's not like we send it to court and say, hey, wait, don't do anything. We don't send it to court. The citation is in our security office, waiting in a pile to, once it reaches 120 days with no action, then these are the ones that we submit to the court. The same thing with that, you either can pay $25 to us. If you don't pay the $25, and we send it to court, and the court may waive the citation, the court may waive the fine, but if the court basically adjudicates the citation and says that it's valid, then the person would either pay the fines to the court. And in that sense, you have the statutory fine, but you also have a bunch of court fees that are added on. And if you don't pay that court amount within the required time, and I honestly don't know what timeline the court sets, then the court ultimately will send that to collections. And so my understanding is it's once it gets sent to collections, that's when it's kind of a reportable thing that goes on your credit report. But the agencies that have the administrative model also send unpaid fines to collections. So for them, that is, if you don't appeal, it's actually within 21 days, you have to request an initial review. And then within 21 days of getting your response on that initial review, if you said it's not fair, and then they say we're denying that appeal, then you have 21 days to request an administrative hearing. So if you don't within that time frame, so maybe give it 2 months if there's times in between those, then they, under those programs, would send that to collections, because you would have missed your deadlines, to pay the fee, or maybe it's within 90 days. But there is a point where under the administrative programs, they also send it to collections. And once it's at the collections vendor, it's my understanding, it would be reported to a credit agency. But we'd have to interview and understand the scope of these collection vendors. If it's a private collection vendor, maybe there's more time before it gets reported to a credit agency. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, because they're turning it over at some point to a third-party vendor. And of course, people don't do, companies don't do things for free. So they're obviously going to add on more fees for their own selves, in addition to whatever they get credit for collecting. And so I was just, kind of wondering what that span was, but it sounds like maybe about 6 months or so before things start to get, really, really bad. I do agree that at the end of the day, I like the program that we have now, and I do see some success, even though we're only looking at 3 months. I think it's not enough time to see, I think it would be fair to at least take it a year so that we can get a full period.
Just a point of clarification on that. The program was a pilot program since 2020, correct? And so we have seen now it is permanent. It's been permanent for that short amount of time, right?
Yeah, so the program was a pilot starting in 2020. The removing the on-the-spot fare. So the on-the-spot, I guess when we say like it's really only started is that before the people that might have participated in diversion were just paying that on-the-spot fare if they got caught
Yeah.
without one. And so it really, not many people ever participated in the diversion program when you had that on-the-spot option. And so
Right.
when we say it hasn't been, it's really looking
When
at
did
the
we
program
institute
since
the
February.
on-the-spot option?
It was part of the original program. It was something that was added by the board when we brought it to them for approval.
I recall. I
Yeah.
recall. I just thought that the fare evasion program, because there was a program also that MTS had already had prior to us making additional changes to that before we decided on, as a board, to broaden that program. And I know this because I had staff members who got tickets who went through that program before we instituted additional components of that program as this board. What my point is, we've had this instituted for a long time in MTS in one way or another.
Mhm. Yeah, so all I'm saying is if we are going to, make changes, that we don't just say, oh, well, we don't do the MTS current model, that we just switch over to the administrative model. I think that that's a concern for me because even the setup costs is unknown. That's what it says on page, what is that, the last page, 10? Or
That can be found out.
either 9 or 10?
I mean, we can find out startup costs. That's not, I mean,
But
in principle, it's fine if, I think it's totally, in your position to have an opinion about it.
Yeah.
But as far as like unknown things, that is what it's taken us years to even get to this point where we have an accurate legal analysis and also facts and also a chart to show us the differences. This is what we've been asking for years.
Right.
So I think those other things, they can at least be known. We can find those out. Staff can find those out.
Yeah, so that was my only concern, is at the end of the day, spending, 350,000 plus whatever startup costs at this particular point, dealing with what we're dealing with our financial cliff. I don't see that as a reasonable thing for us to do at this time. That's just my personal opinion. I think we could stay with the program that we have now, continue to get the data. Hopefully we'll continue to get more and more success as the culture begins to change and people realize that they are going to get in trouble. They are going to have to pay extra money and they are going to be cited immediately if caught. There's no, we're going to let you off this time. That's stopping and more people are paying, and we have that record. And I would just like to see how that goes. And then if we have other changes to try to lock down more participation in people paying, that we look at it at that time. And thank you again for the presentation. I appreciate all the details that you gave us and comparisons. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much for your feedback. Member Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. How easy is it to participate in community service?
So right now we're really flexible. You can like we have some suggestions of places if they don't know, but if somebody comes to us and says, I want to do community service at this location, we're willing to approve it. We might look at it to make sure that it's not actually their, day-to-day job, or personal business, that it is a nonprofit, but we have very few barriers to that process. It hasn't seemed that people that have participated so far, it's been very few that have done community service over time. But if they ask for it, then we try to work with them to identify something that works for them.
Okay, low or no barriers is what I'm hearing, which is
Yes.
good.
Yes.
You could go to your local youth center and say, hey, can I do 3 hours here lifeguarding or filling something? And they'll say, I'll sign off, and that would be good enough.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you again for the presentation. I want to make sure we are having a discussion that is factual and also providing a little bit more context from my perspective, some of which will be my opinion. But the facts are, I mentioned a little bit in the comments in the last presentation that in 2019, there was a study done, right? And there were over 60,000 citations that were written in the year of 2019. It was almost 70,000. The study, and this was through, a media outlet, they probably PRA'd a lot of information. It wasn't directly from MTS or it wasn't from APTA or, we brought APTA in. I'm not talking about those studies, but many of those tickets that were given, by the time they got to the court, they ballooned from say $190 to over $500. At that same time, we were engaging with people that were a part of PATH and other folks from SDSU whose studies showed us that as they were working with people who either were unsheltered or homeless and trying to get permanent housing, or were in the, had shelter, but still in the process of, getting a job or moving on to that next level of their lives, the trolley tickets still kept coming up. We were also talking to public defenders that were dealing with these issues daily. So that's how the whole fare evasion diversion program started. And I will say there was resistance to that program and expanding that program at that time as well. Now we see that it is, for all intents and purposes, it's good that we have it here. It gives people another option. More and more people are taking that option, specifically after February 1st, when the on-the-spot payment is no longer a part of the programming that we are doing. So, yes, we wanted to essentially decriminalize where we could fare evasion. Fare evasion is not violent crime. And at that time, I think I've been on this board for about 6 years, almost 7. There was no distinction between the two when these types of issues were explained to the board. I think we're at a different place now, and I appreciate that. I'm glad for it, because fare evasion is not violent crime. I feel that violent crime should be dealt with on the transit line like it's dealt with everywhere else. That brought up another issue in the legal analysis when we were talking about an administrative model, where SDPD was saying to our MTS representatives that somehow using an administrative model would not allow them to arrest people or detain people, even if they had probable cause. The legal analysis says that is not so. So it doesn't change the activity that our officers would need to conduct on the transit line if there is a potential of a crime going on. So we got that. Those are all mostly some of my opinion, some of my commentary, but mostly facts, right? That is why we're here. We're here just discussing how we decriminalize an activity that the question always is, does the time, so to speak, fit with the crime? Does fare evasion, me not paying $250, should result in over $500 in fees and costs, and me not being able to get an apartment? Should it do that? And we can decide that, right? If we say, yep, that you should, if you don't pay, and that's what you choose, then, you suffer the consequences. Or we can say, I don't think that me not paying it $250 or $5 should amount to, or result in ruining, different aspects of my life down the line. That is the choice that we are making. So yes, we have the charts. It was a really good, informative presentation. We know that Karen and Sharon have worked very diligently with my office. We went to outside counsel, all of those things. We have the information. Now it comes down to a values conversation. And what we stand for, which again, the Fair Diversion Program is a good one. I think I got from the presentation that if we went to an administrative model, we would have to drop the Fair Diversion Program that we currently have. I would like to know if I got that right, and then what specifically do you mean by that? We could not do both simultaneously.
So the administrative program statute does not have a diversion program, and neither of the agencies that have implemented it have a diversion program. I haven't done research to say we would be legally barred from doing that. It seems like you would be adding a whole other step to our program. But certainly that is all the agencies that follow that program don't have a diversion program. Their fines start at $75 and escalate to $125. So, but I wouldn't be able to tell you that we're absolutely not allowed to. I'd have to look at that. I think the statute is silent on it. It's, if you want to do a model, here's a model of what you can do.
And I think just looking at the comparisons, there are aspects of the diversion program that are, as you stated, are administrative, essentially amount to administrative enforcement. Right. And so I think those aspects of the diversion program would, not naturally, of course, nothing happens naturally with policy, but would ultimately be a part of an administrative enforcement model.
There are several parts of our program that align with what is part of that administrative model. Yes.
Because that's how we can, right now, according to the presentation, that's how we can call our model a hybrid.
Right.
So of course, then that means that if the Fair Diversion Program makes us partly an administrative model, then certainly aspects of that would be a part of administrative enforcement.
Yes.
Okay. And for the credit question, and I'm going to be like 3 more minutes, hopefully, but my understanding is that when these penalties, any penalties, but including these, go to the court system, then the court system forwards them to the California Franchise Tax Board. That's how it works. What we don't know is how an administrative process, a fully administrative process would work. Would that still be the case?
I think that we need to flesh that out, but I do think that the way that like LA Metro and some of the agencies is their collections vendor works with the Franchise Tax Board to collect those fines. So I haven't looked side by side about what's the court collection process versus what are the agencies that are doing it looks like it, but it very well might be that it ends in the same spot.
That would all be things that we would have to still research if we were going to implement or put together an implementation plan.
Okay. My last question before I make my motion. With the 15 days, I may not remember correctly, but I thought originally our program had, or at least we had the option of having expanding that out to 21 days at one point. And did we change it? Or no? Was it always 15 days? Is that where we?
I believe it's always been 15 days. Okay. I'd have to go back, but I don't imagine that being something. And again, we're not strict. If someone reaches out to us on the 21st day, we would still try to, investigate it. I think we put 15 days to prompt people if this is a big concern. We assume a little bit that they'd be mad about it as soon as they got the citation. It would just motivate to preserve evidence. The sooner you can get this complaint into us, then the better chance we have of being able to investigate it.
I think I remember us looking at some data to show that after a certain amount of days, then not a lot of people were, once it hit like that 14-day mark, then after that, not a lot of people were engaging.
Yeah, you're remembering, I think it was 2 years ago, we brought back some potential changes to
Yeah.
in fact, I think that's when we reduced the fee to 25.
No, I think we'd had some proposals of do they want to reduce it? But
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
we may have looked at
Yeah,
it,
but
but
that's
for
what you're
me, the reason
remembering.
why I justify the 15 is just there are cameras on our system
Yeah.
that's like a mark where if they come 21 days, we may or may not have video. And that's the easiest way for some of these things to investigate.
But yeah, no, that makes sense. I just, there have been, we have done our work as policymakers on this in that going back and forth, checking to see what works and what does not. We've really done that work. So I appreciate it. I am gonna move that we direct staff to prepare a plan to answer some of these additional questions that have come up to change our model. I want to be able to look at that, and I want to look at what going fully administrative having a fully administrative fair enforcement model would look like for MTS. I have no idea, what the appetite is, but I still do believe that there are plenty of places where we criminalize folks, and this shouldn't be one of them. And if there are things that we can do to stop sort of that chain, that cycle of poverty is what I'm thinking about. If there are ways that we can help in breaking some of those cycles for folks, I think we should do that work. I do, with regard to the 300K or so of ongoing expenses, I'm just wondering, and this is not, I always think about what kind of return on investment are we going to get from that person that provided us a quote when we talked about the fair diversion program, that, they're able to continue school, not have that barrier. What kind of offering are they going to give to society later on because this was provided for them? And there's no way to quantify that, but in my mind, that's how I think about these programs. So I will just put that motion on the floor because I do think, and then of course it come back to us because I think that this deserves further conversation.
So can I be clear on the motion? Can you just repeat your motion? just so
I
can be
would
clear?
like I would like to direct staff at this time to prepare a plan for our enforcement model to change to a fully administrative fair enforcement model, and to come back within that plan to answer some of the unresolved questions that have been asked during this committee hearing, and that come back to committee. So it's not a decision that is made, it's more information, a plan. How would we actually roll that out? What would be, some of the consequences? We've heard about some of the comparisons, but there's still a lot of questions.
I would second that.
Okay, thank you. Member Foster.
Thank you for the motion. I know I'm new to MTS and the board, but I do agree that we need to look at not criminalizing folks that are using the system. And I say that, and I do have a question, just if you could refresh my memory. I recall having a SANDAG meeting where we were talking about fees. When the decision was made to increase the fees, ridership fees. And I believe in order to do that and have that conversation, there's a study done in regards to ridership. And I believe what struck me was the conversation about undue burden or fairness. And I believe in the study and the way SANDAG termed their analysis was that increasing the fare is, I'm gonna say acceptable, because a majority of the ridership, I wanna say 70% of the ridership was deemed folks of low income per se, right? And so when they did this analysis, and it's a very specific test or analysis that they need to do. Is that correct? Am I recalling that properly?
So if I'm remembering what the conversation at Sandegg was about, it was that they surveyed people who currently use transit and they would prefer to spend more on fares than have their service cut. And those were specific conversations which led them to agree to do a fare study with us in order to possibly change our fare structure system. And that certainly is a conversation that we're having because the fiscal cliff is coming and we somehow have to make up that $110 million, $120 million deficit in our operating budget. And so the ways you do it is get more revenue or you cut your operating costs. And the only way you cut your operating costs at that level is through cutting service. So that's the conversation that I remember they had at the retreat.
This wasn't a retreat, this was an actual hearing. And the conversation was around the conversation was around discrimination, right? And applying the fare and how it impacts the ridership.
I think it's Title VI analysis.
Yeah,
or title...
correct. And so essentially what I found very interesting was that they basically said, we're okay, let's raise the fares. We're not discriminatory because 70% of our riders are low income individuals.
Oh, that must have been the disparate impact.
Yes.
Okay, so that was the disparate impact. They have to do that study when they do a fare change.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I bring all of that up to say, and even as we talk about the fiscal cliff, the folks who ride our transportation system are not folks who per se necessarily do it out of convenience. It's because that is their mode of transportation and how they survive. And so I think if we are going to have a conversation around what happens to these individuals who find themselves in a court situation or a very bad situation as they are trying to improve their lives and make ends meet. So for me, I think this is a good approach. So I appreciate the motion to move forward and to work out more details, because I think there are several details. And I guess my question would be just in my quick look at attachment A that was provided when you look at the government code. The way the government code reads, it sounds like there is, I'm going to say, a ceiling in regards to certain fines and certain approaches. The terms that I'm seeing are not to exceed, which means we do have some latitude. I would assume we have some latitude to determine just what this administrative process will look like. Am I kind of accurate? Am I understanding the government code?
Yes. Yes.
Right. And so I think this additional work is necessary as we make a final decision on what we want this program to look like. Also, I will say in regards to diversion program, I didn't see anything in the statutes that said you can do it or cannot do it, which if it's silent for me, I don't have, access to case law, X, Y, and Z, but it seems like we should have some flexibility to also look at what we can do there as well. So I'll be supporting the motion. I'm looking forward to staff returning with a more comprehensive or to fill in some more of the gaps in regards to the work that you've done thus far. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Member Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. As I'm hearing, the wording on the screen is the motion that staff should prepare a plan to change from MTS hybrid to a fully administrative, answering some holes. That's the way I'm understanding the motion. Hearing that the community service option is very low barrier, very easy. It could be as easy as monitoring kids playing basketball at a youth center for 3 hours and you're done. How long do I get to complete that community, those 3 hours?
The 120-day period.
Okay, so I get 4 months to do it from the date of the citation or the date of the decision to
The date of the citation.
date of the citation. Okay. I have I question whether we are criminalizing somebody who has the choice to solve the problem with a low barrier solution. If you choose, if you cannot afford a monetary fine, and I give you 4 months to donate 3 hours of your time to a worthy community cause, to make it whole, that seems to be, I don't think we're criminalizing somebody because they have a choice on what solution they take. I agree that only 2 months into this process is a little too early to do that. So I think we should wait more to see. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Just one last quick question. So when in the model where the tickets, you go to the court, what, I know we no longer engage after that, but what happens with the fine? If people pay or don't pay, like where does that money go?
So it's a very opaque process. I mean, it gets collected by the court, you know, and it goes back to the court, and then we get a check a few times a year, I think. Okay, monthly, but it doesn't individualize it. So you have no idea what that pot of money is necessarily like for. And so it might be restitution that's been collected. It might be fare evasion fines. It might be fines in other cases. And so we get that. I don't have the data in front of me about how much. It's not a significant amount. So, you know, we've always kind of counseled the dollar amounts that are on here. We're not trying to use the fines as a revenue collection. We're trying to use the fare enforcement program as a way to encourage people to buy their fare in the first place. Like we don't think the fines will ever make up for the costs of the program or the enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, that goes either way, especially if the fines don't make up for it.
Right. I mean, if we come back to you, I can bring back a report specifically on what we have been getting from the courts. I just know generally it's hard for us to even understand what those dollar amounts are for.
Okay, appreciate that. Okay, I think that's it for discussion. So there's a motion and a second on the floor. Let's vote.
Members, please make your selections on the tablets. Motion passes with 4 members voting yes and 1 member voting no.
Thank you very much for that. And thank you everyone for the discussion. Thank you, Karen and Sharon and Samantha also for the work. Let us go to item number 6, which is public safety through environmental design. And so I think Heather and Chris have a presentation for us.
Good morning. I'm Heather Fury. I'm the Director of Capital Projects at MTS. I'm here with Chris Duddy, who's from our planning department, and we're going to briefly go through this public safety through environmental design presentation. Regularly and through our feedback channels, we hear from MTS customers that safety while waiting at our stations is a high priority. We have increased security personnel presence throughout the system, as well as implemented some projects to make improvements at the stations and for station assets. Public safety through environmental design uses design principles to make safe spaces feel safer through both built and natural environmental features. The things that bring feelings of safety, are more lighting, controlled access points, and these types of things, including art, can deter criminal activity and help build community at our stations. So we're going to walk through some of the things we've been doing around MTS lately, and then Chris is going to talk about what's coming next. I mentioned public art lighting. I didn't mention landscaping. trash can improvements, increased cleaning, and bus stops are going to be the focus today. So we'll start with public art. This is a mural at our Massachusetts station called Heartline. I'm happy to go back to any of these, but I'll kind of flip through them quickly. This is a before and after at Grossmont Station. Another one at Grossmont Station. This is down at our East Street station, a mural. This one's pretty long. And then 62nd Street also has a new mural. For lighting improvements, we've added lighting in our updating to LED light fixtures at Grossmont Station. Our Lemon Grove Depot recently got new lighting. It's much brighter. We've enhanced the lighting in the Old Town pedestrian tunnel. And we are working our way through all of the Orange Line trolley stations. The platform lighting at the stations on the left have been completed, and we're now working through the parking lot areas. The parking lot should have been done next month. I was told yesterday afternoon that the wrong poles got sent by the manufacturer, so it might be a few more weeks beyond that date, but it's still in process. And here's some pictures of the enhanced lighting at some of these trolley stations. This one's one of my favorites. Bus stops are a place where both drivers and passengers struggle in low light scenarios, and it can be a challenge to get lights at bus stops because we need to get a new service from SDG&E. We found a company that makes solar lights that are for bus stop poles. So we're going to install 33 of them, and our first one has been installed on 43rd Street at El Cajon along Route 13. We should have all 33 installed by the end of this year. And this project was about $1 million. And this slide shows kind of the before and after of this particular stop on 43rd Street. What I particularly love about it is that the light is very focused on the bus stop and where the patron would be waiting, but really doesn't flood the area outside of the bus stop. So hopefully it won't be a nuisance to neighbors and other people in the area. Moving on to landscaping and cleanliness. We did a whole lot of beautification at the Grantville station. Some of this was supported by a grant with the housing projects. But some other stations that we have improved are the 32nd Street station landscaping. We've added some landscaping at San Ysidro, at the El Cajon station, and at the Massachusetts station. We've been changing out the trash receptacles throughout downtown and on the Blue Line, now separating recycle from waste. And then upcoming projects, the Buyer Boulevard Pathway Beautification Project, we're pretty excited about. This is about 1/10 of a mile long pathway that connects the existing Buyer Boulevard trolley station to West Park Avenue and the park between the two park avenues. There's a large residential development at Cypress Street and a community park. We got some support from Caltrans on this, and we're teamed with Casa Familiar. This project's going to include landscaping, hardscape, sculptures, and murals. We've awarded a design contract for this work and selected 2 artists working with Casa directly. And we're hoping this project will be complete in 2026. And not only will this connect our trolley passengers, there's also a TOD planned for the Buyer Boulevard trolley station. So this will get the people that are living at the station out into the community as well. Again, it's about 1/10 of a mile, and it will connect most of the community. Today, it's kind of unimproved. There's sidewalk, but some kind of dirt gravel areas. So on the bottom are some renderings of what the pathway will look like with 2 sculptures by the artist Johnny Bear. And at the top is a mural designed by Alicia Sweet that will be displayed along the pathway as well. The East Buyer Rail Bridge, we are going to be installing a mural here. The board approved the mural artist concept on April 17th, And prior to this installation, we have installed lighting under the bridge so that once the artwork goes up, it will be visible during nighttime as well. Other things we're doing around the system, we've been installing new VMS signs. The orange line signs, all 78 of them have now been upgraded, including all of the signs downstairs at 12th and Imperial for buses and for the Green Line station. So the 12th and Imperial campus now has the new VMS signs. Up next, we'll be doing the Blue Line and the Green Line. So a total of about 134 new signs will be coming and should be installed by by mid 2026.
And I think the point being that the VMS signs it gives a sense of security to somebody coming to the station that, yes, my train is going to arrive and it's going to be soon. So it gives people a better feeling of security, knowing that they're not going to be waiting in one spot for that long.
And if it is, a 15-minute wait, maybe you go walk around the block or find something else to do in the meantime. But you kind of know how to plan your stay. System cleanliness, we sanitize all of the trolley stations 1 to 2 times per week. The new trash cans I showed earlier are making an improvement in the cleanliness. And we have increased our bus bench cleaning up to 50% from 10%. And our entire fleet, buses and 160 trolleys, 750 buses are cleaned every night after service. Another thing we really are promoting and we know is helpful is just activity at transit centers, having storefronts and concessions, MTS staff and others around kind of helps build a sense of safety for riders. We have 12 concession buildings at or under contract at our trolley stations. And we're planning to add more at Iris this year. And Lemon Grove just got the Lemon Grove Depot we showed earlier is now kind of an outpost for our security teams. So there'll be more of a presence there. And last but not least at all, our MTS bus stop upgrades. Each year we fund bus stop upgrade improvements, whether they're for assisting our ADA customers or getting more amenities like buses and shelters, bus benches and shelters out for our customers. We've got 8 locations that are under contract and construction is expected to start in the next couple of months. The picture on the left is an existing stop that is slated for improvement. On the right is just an engineering drawing, but I look forward to coming back to you next time with a much better photo showing the as-built condition, getting rid of the grass between the sidewalk and the curb, making for easier boarding process, and improving the area. And then again, at bus stops, a lot of requests for shelters and improving that area. At times, it can be challenging to add shelters everywhere we want because we might not have a wide enough sidewalk that makes turning radiuses and proper movement for ADA communities. So we do have to do some engineering similar to what I just showed you for the bus bench. But we've started that process on 26 bus stops. Here's a lengthy list of them. Each of these is supposed to get a shelter. We started with 30 stops. A few have been improved by others during our planning process. A couple of them got developments nearby. So we're working through these 26 and are hopeful they'll be completed by the fall of 2027. It can be challenging to get through the permitting process with our jurisdictions. But in this case, we'll be working with National City, Chula Vista, and the City of San Diego. Now I'll turn it over to Chris to talk about some future work underway.
Thanks, Heather. Chris Studdy, Senior Transportation Planner for MTS, and I'll be talking about the Transit Amenities Plan, its associated survey, and then also ending this with fare gates. So the Transit Amenities Plan, or TAP is going to be a plan that's going to take a comprehensive look at all our amenities. We submitted a planning grant in early 2025, hoping to hear back from that in fall. And the goals of the project will be to get feedback from the community so that when we're looking at potential amenities, we're ensuring that it's what the community wants there, reviewing best practices with amenity citing, what's there, and then also identifying innovative solutions. Examples of that, the pictures on the right, it's called La Sombrita, which is in LA, where it's a kind of a short-term bus shelter where it can shield people from the shade. And then in the bottom right, Sunline Transit in Riverside County, semi-seat that goes onto the bus pole, kind of a quick way where you can implement a bench. Just to clarify, none of these are actual recommendations of the project, really just giving examples of what the project will look at and what can be implemented. And then lastly, it'll develop a prioritization plan for us to use and implement stop improvements. And so it'll look at all our 4,000 stops, assess the existing amenity distribution of the stops, estimate costs for improvements, adding additional amenities and the maintenance to ensure that anything that is implemented will be sustainable in the future. And then also just evaluate the current conditions of how easy it is to increase amenities at stops. With grant funding, the project is planned to kick off in fall 2025 and then slated for completion in fall of 2026. So to support the transit amenities plan, MTS will be surveying all 4,000 plus stops out in the system. The map to the right is an example of this. The red stops are stops that haven't been surveyed. The green stops have. It's slowly growing every day. But we developed an app that records different characteristics. As you can see to the right, recording amenity or shelter stops, trash cans, various operational pieces, bus pads, red curb, preventing personal vehicles from parking there so the vehicles can easily survey it, and then sidewalk length so that we can identify how much or what amenities could be implemented there. Finally, once complete, we'll have a reference of all our stops, current photos, the associated amenities for easy reference. And then this will help support the transit amenities plan and any kind of recommendations that come out of that. This is a cross-department collaboration. As you can see on the right, gauges between different departments and stops that they're responsible for, a little friendly competition between each team. Started in May 2025, and we're planning for completion in September of 2025. Moving on to fare gates, MTS has had preliminary discussions and done research regarding the implementation of fare gates. There has been mixed results on just the ability for them to prevent fare evasion. There is usually a long-term return on investment of the implementation of the fare gates. And then for MTS specifically, a lot of challenges in creating those perimeters. 56 of our 64 transit or trolley stations are at grade and would be very difficult to prevent people from walking into the street and then just boarding the platform that way. There are some stations that are elevated, which would be easier. You see San Diego Stadium, and then also SDSU, which is underground. But even with those separated stations, there would still be equipment that would need to be relocated and spaces that would need to be identified for that. And with kind of adding fare gates, we would have to increase existing fence height to limit people jumping over, increase the number of gates required, limiting access points, And then we have really three very different types of trolley stations that each have their own challenges, which I'll talk a little bit more about or show images as well of the downtown urban trolley stations, TODs, and transit centers. So at Fifth Avenue Station, this is very dense. The stop's very connected to the sidewalk, and adding barriers there would really limit just pedestrian access in general. Moving over to County Center Station, Little Italy, very similar to downtown with that yellow delineator between tracks. I think with regulations, that's the highest height that we can put anything there. So even if we were able to find a way to block the tracks and allow the trolley to easily serve the station, we would still be limited by that height there. For TODs like Moreno Linda Vista Station, this was built specifically for connections to trolleys with multiple access points from the parking lot, the city skywalk, businesses as well. Adding fare gates here will limit a lot of the original design for the station. Moving over to transit centers, East Street Transit Center in the image to the right. There's an easy connection between bus and trolley. Adding fare gates there would require, again, raising the existing fences and then also limiting that access between the two where space may not always be available. We see with Balboa Transit Center, one of our newer stations, similar aspect with right now an easy transfer between the trolley and the bus where it's open. And this would need to be, we need to identify a way to fence this off and allow that to happen. With that, that concludes the presentation. Open it up to questions or comments.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Just going to turn it over to see if there's any public comment.
We do not.
Okay, thank you so much. Committee members, any questions, comments? Yes, Member Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. You made 52 slides go pretty fast. That's a daunting task. 36 and 37 are about listening tours, and we identified which bus stops were getting upgrades. Can you explain that process just a little more closely for me? I am truly the new guy here, and I want to know more.
Yeah, this was part of our social equity listening tour that we did. We were trying to determine what our communities were feeling we had underinvested in. And we asked them, we had a consultant do a deep dive with all of our communities to try to find out what they would like to see. And we partnered with a lot of NGOs and that community-based organizations. We were hoping to find really what were we missing? What had we underinvested in? And how were we negatively impacting the ability of people to safely and comfortably access public transportation? And so one of the things that was high on that list was upgrades to the bus stops. And specifically what people were concerned about when we did focus groups on public safety was the waiting environment made them feel uncomfortable for buses in particular. And again, with 4,000 plus bus stops, you can imagine that there's areas where it might feel pretty isolated if you had to sit and wait. And so that's why we focused on better lighting at bus stops, but also just upgrades to the waiting experience in general through bus shelters and making it easier for people from the accessibility community to access public transportation. These were the kinds of things. And when we identified the locations, it was really, we were trying to find, we used a number of different factors, but a lot of it had to do with what were considered disadvantaged communities through the Cal Envirus screen. So anyway.
No, thank you for that. That context. And so moving forward, how is it that we're going to identify other bus stops to upgrade?
Well, and that's the transit amenities study that we're doing. Currently, with them going out and surveying all of our bus stops and putting them into one big database, that will help us understand where the gaps are in what we have out there. And then some of it, sometimes you just can't upgrade the bus stop.
I saw
because
that,
of
like
the
widening the sidewalks and
Yeah.
whatnot. I get that.
There's private property involved, or
Yeah.
there's a hillside, or you're literally on the freeway. So there's gonna be places that we just wouldn't, even if we wished for a much better waiting environment, we wouldn't be able to achieve. But that will be prioritized within the transit amenities study.
And when's the next time that that'll come back to either the board of directors or?
Well,
this body?
we're in the process of applying for a grant right now, and we're hopeful to get that grant, I believe, by this fall, summer, okay. This summer, and then ultimately, we would want an implementable plan by the end of 2026 calendar year. The nice thing is, if we identify a new source of revenue by then, we can immediately start implementing the results of that plan.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm so glad it's included in our committee because it's part of that holistic approach to public safety. I know when I go to the trolley and look at the kiosk with the times, it helps me, even when I've checked the schedule beforehand, it just helps me to better organize, like you said, go get a cup of coffee if there's a coffee shop around or whatever it is, while we're waiting. So just helpful to know. And the lighting, I know that's something we've discussed, particularly with women in safety in this committee. We had Circulate San Diego come and talk about, and focus on women and how women feel with regard to their safety and riding. So it's good to see that all of that is a part of the conversation, and not just a part of the conversation, but a part of our budgetary decisions. So thank you very much for the presentation. Okay, we're gonna go to item number 7, and that is if any committee members have any communications that you would like the committee to know about. Or Sharon, do you have anything? Okay.
I'll just give announcement for La Mesa. Normally Juneteenth is held on a weekend. This time it's being held on the actual day, which is the official holiday. And this time the foundation is focused on financial literacy, and all are invited. There's going to be a big pancake breakfast, and the firefighters and the police department has decided to join in on this effort for anyone who needs financial literacy. So we're inviting parents and their children and anyone else that would like to attend on June the 19th at 9 a.m. Thank you.
What's the location?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's at the normal place, which is MacArthur Park.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
that. I wanted to see, since we were talking a little bit about a vice chair, if anyone wanted to volunteer to be a vice chair of this committee? To be a vice chair of this committee. It's sort of informal, but if you want to volunteer, then I think Sharon, you all will put it on the June agenda for the whole
For the
board.
board, yes. If anybody would be willing to be appointed as the vice chair, and then that would mean that if the chair is absent for some reason, we could continue to have the committee meetings.
Okay. All right, everyone's like, I'll do it if I have to. Okay. Well, the vice chair, Member Dillard said that she was fine with it, so, okay, all right. So then if that's okay with everyone, then we'll have it put on the agenda for the entire board to vote on. Thank you so much. Okay, our next meeting date is Friday, September 5th at 1 p.m. I'm gonna see if I try to change that. Give you on Friday afternoon back. So at this time, we will adjourn the meeting. It's 12:22. Thank you.